Facebook. It is April 3rd, 2020. We got a big show today. As it says in the title, we're looking at simple, affordable COVID prevention measures designed to keep you out of the hospital and away from equally deadly medical bills, very expensive bills if you end up going to the ER. We're going to cover that today. We're talking about emerging pharmaceutical treatments that are affordable. Talking about the FDA recently approving an antibody test for the COVID. More reasons why we cannot trust the mainstream media, and a whole lot more here at Wake Up Wyoming. Thanks for tuning in. Please give us a like, give us a share, give it a thumbs up, start a watch party if you feel so inclined. Big news here in Lincoln County. We've got our first case of COVID-19 reported locally. So says Buckrail, reported yesterday. So there we go. Other local news briefly. Unfortunately, yesterday they recovered the body of a man who died in an avalanche up there on Taylor Mountain, south side of Taylor. Sad to see that. Heartbreaking always, especially in the midst of so much other stuff going on. What's up, Jay Scott North? Thanks for tuning in. How many viewers we got? We got 8 viewers. How do we get some shares on this? Let me see if I can share this over there on wakeupnews.com. Get a watch party going. Share it to my personal page. Let's see what we can do here. What's up, John Saris? Thanks for tuning in. Allah Akbar. What does that mean anyway? God is great. Is that right? I don't know. A lot that I don't know out there. Okay, it's going to get loud for a second here until I pause it. Oh, we got 53 viewers. Bear with me for a second while I give this a share. Try to give it a share. Thank you all for tuning in. Huh. Come on. How do I start a watch party up here? We'll share it to Wake Up 2.0. Anybody else want to share this? That'd be great. We got a big show. We're getting into a lot of things. Well, I got 60 viewers. Let's get into it. But I encourage all you to share it. Again, start a watch party if you can. It's amazing. There's so much coverage locally, so many laws being passed, but very few, it's amazing how much fear is being generated by the mainstream media in the midst of all this. Yet none of them talk about time-tested remedies to boost your immune system, etc. Time-tested ways to stay healthy, to stay out of the hospital. So we're going to cover those briefly and look at some emerging treatments that have gotten emergency approval from the FDA. Interestingly, well, let's just get right into it. Number one, again, local media, all this talk about fear, all these new laws, but nobody is out there just saying, hey, here's what you can do to stay healthy. Number one, stay hydrated. Simple. You want to get that good, clean water. We got to avoid fluoride. We got to avoid bottled water with the BPA and other estrogen analogs that'll mess up your system. Me, I'm drinking some good herbal tea. What am I going with today? I got some organic everyday detox. Echinacea Plus, that'll help you stay healthy, and the good old throat coat. I like mixing them up. Number two, get adequate rest. Can't stress that enough. Number three, don't stress. It's so easy to get overwhelmed with all the doom and gloom, the fear porn surrounding COVID and the collapsing economy. Number four, easier said than done. Don't smoke. I don't know about you, but I got a raging nicotine addiction myself. I don't have the stuff around here, but I've been using those Zen packages. That's like a synthetic nicotine. Seems to work pretty good. Doesn't tear up my lungs or my gums or anything like that. Gets me my nicotine fix without destroying my lungs. Is it healthier? I don't know. But I do know nicotine is a very addictive and powerful drug. So whatever you can do to not smoke, do it. Healthy diet and exercise, the program, friends. Again, while you're watching the show today, get up and move, stretch it out, do some toe touches, just rock her back and forth, whatever. Get active, my friends, get active. As always, I recommend limiting exposure to unnatural EMF. Hardwire those computers if you can. Shut down your Wi-Fi connections. Turn off those smartphones. Don't hold them up to your ear. Don't use those cell phone as an alarm clock. And if you do have that stuff around the house, put it in airplane mode when you're not using it. Stay warm and dry, especially your feet. Vitamin supplements, vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin D3, zinc, etc. Got my zinc right here. You don't want to overdo the zinc. Good to take it on a full stomach because it can cause some nausea. Time-tested herbal remedies, you know, there's all sorts of them out there. I'm going to show you guys an article here in just a second. Garlic, just eat those cloves. Ginger, get you some ginger. Just take a big old bite. Chew it up. Delicious, delicious. Spit that into your tea. Yeah, it's a little potent, but you know what? You just got a ginger shot. You got it in your tea. Sarah Martinez with a comment there. Hot liquids like teas and soups, elderberry syrup, echinacea will boost the immune system. Yeah. My friend Jenna Nash-Rena up in Bozeman sent me some elderberry syrup this winter. It's delicious, and it definitely helps boost the immune system as well. Herbal remedies, you know, you can find all sorts of information about that online. I'm just going with a couple readily available and affordable basics: garlic and ginger. Nasal rinsing, aka the neti pot. Again, medical therapies, the chloroquine or aka or also hydroxychloroquine, very similar anti-malarial drugs, possibly in combination with the mineral zinc and Z-Pak antibiotics, aka azithromycin. Okay, I'm not giving medical advice here. I'm just sharing information I found on the internet. This guy in New York State, Dr. Vladimir Zelenko, there's his protocol. Check it out. You know, people that are experiencing difficulty breathing, I think it's important that we all try to stay, you know, they're giving us all these warnings about how the hospitals are going to be overwhelmed. And I think for our own health and well-being, you know, especially our economic, financial well-being, it's good to stay out of the hospital, which is why I'm recommending all these things people can do to stay healthy, to beat all sorts of diseases. Stay out of the hospital. But if you do have difficulty breathing, you might look into supplemental oxygen therapy like tanks or CPAP machines, as opposed to the ventilators. Again, I'm not giving medical advice. I'm just saying, you know, the advantages to these treatments is they can be conducted in the privacy of your own home, and they're much more affordable, and you're a lot less exposed to germs when you're in your own home than in an ICU bed, knocked out with a mechanical ventilator breathing for you, racking up $5,000 to $10,000 a day of medical bills. Out of Japan, the Abajan, a Japanese antiviral drug patented by Fujifilm, and of course ICU ventilation. All this talk about ventilators, I can't stress it enough. It's extremely expensive, and you're stuck in a hospital. Coming from Organic Consumers Association, I would love to copy and paste this into the links, into the comments. Oh, good. There it is. I just added that, so check it out. Coronavirus, what are the best alternatives for self-care? A lot of great info here on organicconsumers.org. Check that out. Like Sarah said, elderberry, echinacea. Look at that. Elderberry and echinacea recommended as herbs. Essential oils, stress management, covered that one. So, you know, inform yourself. Take care of yourselves. There's never been a better time than right now. Today, we're looking at news from a couple sources. Nakedcapitalism.com has got a good daily news roundup that I picked from today, and also the Indomitable Rice Farmer. Here's all his links for the day. Whew. Keeps me on my toes trying to keep up with what's going on in the world, but I have gone through this whole list and that list at Naked Capitalism looking for pertinent information to share with all of you today. Let's get into it. Official statistics, we better refresh it because they're always updating it on the fear porn map here. Important to note, these official statistics are difficult to trust. It's hard to trust the mainstream media. It's hard to trust governments, and it's hard to trust the medical, insurance, pharmaceutical complex cartel controlling medicine in this country, because all three of them are known liars. So take it all with a grain of salt. But looking at this here, according to the most fear porny, doomy figures that I can find, 1,066,706 total confirmed cases worldwide, 56,767 deaths. It's important to note there are 7.8 billion people on the planet. and everybody is being affected by the fallout of this unfolding disaster, this pandemic. But so far, only 1 million people have confirmed cases of the disease, and globally, only 56,767 total deaths. Interestingly, a large percentage of those deaths are being reported by Italy. We can't trust these figures coming out of Italy for a lot of reasons. Okay, James Corbett, the indomitable, brilliant James Corbett. I'm going to let this play. Listen up.
But let's continue diving into these Italian numbers and what that means. I want you to reflect on what was just reported in that article, because it's important, but it has been reported and then swept under the rug and not really taken into account. When we get these startling record number of deaths in Italy, they can't get coffins fast enough. Well, hold on a second. We get this, for example, from offguardian.org, talking about this Italian mortality phenomenon. They have a post. In Italy, only 12% of COVID-19 deaths list COVID-19 as cause. Report shows up to 88% of Italy's alleged COVID-19 deaths could be misattributed. And they talk about the report, citing Professor Walter Ricciardi, in which he says, the way in which we code deaths in our country is very generous, in the sense that all the people who die in hospitals with the coronavirus are deemed to be dying of the coronavirus. On reevaluation by the National Institute of Health, only 12% of death certificates have shown a direct causality from coronavirus, while 88% of patients who have died have at least one premorbidity, i.e. other type of disease. Many had 2 or 3. As Off-Guardian notes, this has been reported widely. It was even in the Telegraph, and yet no one seems to be engaging with it. The president of the Italian Civil Protection Service actually went out of his way to remind people on the nature of Italy's fatality figures in a morning briefing on March 20th. I want you to remember these people died with the coronavirus and not from the coronavirus.
Thank you, James.
What does this actually mean? It means that the Italian death toll figures could have been artificially inflated by up to 88%. If true, this would mean the total number of Italians who have actually died of COVID-19 could be as low as 700, which would bring Italy, currently a statistical outlier in terms of COVID-19 fatalities, well in line with the rest of the world. It means thousands of deaths currently widely attributed to COVID-19 and being used to justify the introduction of measures equating to medical martial law may not have died of COVID-19 at all, but of their serious chronic comorbidity, cancer, heart disease, etc. This statistic is not a secret or in any way controversial. It was in the Telegraph, after all, but people seem to be ignoring it or reading around it, or perhaps simply not understanding it. And those numbers that they're throwing around there, of course, are from the time frame of that article on March 23rd. If you want slightly newer and more official numbers, you can go to the actual Italian report in English from the Italian Health Institute. The characteristics of COVID-19 patients dying in Italy report based on available data on March 26th, 2020. And this report goes on to detail the statistics that they've compiled of people dying of COVID-19 in Italy, including the fact that the average age of people dying of this disease in Italy, according to the official numbers of just a few days ago, is 78. The average age of the people dying is 78 years old. And keep in mind, just to put that number in perspective, the average life expectancy in Italy is 82. So that should put those numbers in perspective. But then in that report, on the section 3 on pre-existing conditions, it shows that the number of people dying without 21.3% had one other disease, 25.9% had 2 other diseases, and 50.7%, i.e. the majority of people dying in Italy, have died with 3 other diseases on top of coronavirus. So to say that all of these deaths are coronavirus deaths is at the very least misleading, and it does raise a lot of questions.
There we have it from James Corbett. Follow his work over there at corbettreport.com. Brilliant guy. Much appreciated, James, for all your hard work. So again, when we see these statistics coming out of Italy, 14,681 deaths out of a total confirmed 120,000 cases, that would explain why their statistics are so out of line with the rest of the world. And globally, if we can say somewhere around 80 to 90% of those Italian deaths are not accurate, how can we trust the statistics coming from anywhere? Also hard to trust the mainstream media. They just give us more proof every day. Case in point, CBS admits to using footage from Italy in their New York City coronavirus report. So says the New York Post, published on April Fools, but it's not a joke. It's how they roll. Interestingly, looking at COVID-19 navigating the uncharted from the New England Journal of Medicine, you might know this guy's name, Anthony S. Fauci, MD, rather prominent out there these days. This was published on the 26th. I'm going to read you a little excerpt here. On the basis of a case definition requiring a diagnosis of pneumonia, the currently reported case fatality rate is approximately 2%. In another article in the journal, Guan et al. Report mortality of 1.4% among 1,099 patients with laboratory-confirmed COVID-19. These patients had a wide spectrum of disease severity. If one assumes, which is a pretty safe assumption, I might add, to the New England Journal of Medicine here, if one assumes that the number of asymptomatic or minimally symptomatic cases is several times as high as the number of reported cases, the case fatality rate may be considerably less than 1%. This suggests that the overall clinical consequences of COVID-19 may ultimately be more akin to those of a severe seasonal influenza, which has a case fatality rate of approximately 0.1%, or a pandemic influenza, similar to those in 1957 and 1968, rather than a disease similar to SARS or MERS, which have had case fatality rates of 9 to 10% and 36%, respectively. So, New England Journal of Medicine letting us know, the actual death rate from COVID is probably more akin to those of severe seasonal influenza or pandemic influenza. Looking at, this is a great article. I'm going to read you this whole puppy here. Caitlin Johnson, if you don't follow her work, I strongly advise you to follow her. She has a great way of picking through all the BS in the world. And let's get into it. Caitlin Johnson, thank you for your tireless efforts to inform people. A lot of people, this broadcast probably labeled disinformation by a lot of folks. Hey, I'm just trying to share information, not trying to make money, right? It's difficult to trust news sources that are all about making money. It's difficult to trust governments that are all about making money and getting power. And it's difficult to trust hospitals, the medical, insurance, pharmaceutical complex, which is also a profit-driven endeavor trying to make money. Let's get into the article. Coronavirus disinformation is the hot topic of the day, with pressure mounting on social media platforms to censor incorrect information about the virus and mainstream news outlets blaring dire warnings every day about the threat posed by the circulation of false claims about the pandemic. As fast as the coronavirus has raced around the globe, it has been outpaced by a blinding avalanche of social media sorcery and propaganda related to the pathogen, much of it apparently originating where? Well, of course, in Russia. The Washington Post editorial board warns, as always, when it comes to its relations with the West, Moscow's main currency is disinformation, and it spends lavishly, says the Washington Post. This would be the same Washington Post who falsely assured us that the Bush administration had provided irrefutable proof that the government of Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. The same Washington Post who falsely assured us that Russian hackers had penetrated the U.S. electricity grid to cut off heat during the winter, and who circulated a McCarthyite blacklist of alternative media outlets designated Russian propaganda. compiled by a group of anonymous internet trolls. The same Washington Post whose sole owner, Bezos, is a literal CIA contractor, yet never discloses this brazen conflict of interest when reporting on the U.S. intelligence community as per standard journalistic protocol. If outlets like the Washington Post had done a better job of consolidating their reputation as a reliable news source, instead of constantly deceiving their readers about very important matters, people would believe them instead of believing a blinding avalanche of social media sorcery and web wizardry and internet incantations and electronic enchantments and net necromancy. She's got away with words. We're seeing these urgent warnings about coronavirus disinformation and misinformation from mainstream outlets who sold the public lies about war after war, election after election, status quo supporting narrative after status quo supporting narrative. Here's how to fight coronavirus misinformation, reads a headline by The Atlantic, whose editor-in-chief, Jeffrey Goldberg, once assured us that the coming of invasion of Iraq will be remembered as an act of profound morality, and whose star writer is David, Axis of Evil, from. China and Russia have seized the coronavirus outbreak to wage disinformation campaigns that seek to undermine the U.S. and its handling of the crisis, rather than addressing public criticism of their own struggles with the pandemic, warns the New York Times, who played a leading role in the disinformation campaign to build support for the Iraq invasion and who aggressively pushed crazy-making Russian hysteria, including famously retracting its bogus 17 intelligence agencies claim. Caitlin Johnson on point as usual. Bear in mind, none of these mainstream reputable news sources have ever told us the truth about what really happened on 9/11, right? They've never looked deep into it. They've never questioned what actually happened to Building 7, like the 9/11 Commission report. None of these corporate, profit-driven propaganda agencies like the New York Times, the Washington Post, etc., have ever actually told us the truth about what happened 20 years ago, which was used to start the endless war of terror, eliminate freedoms, justify spying on the whole world. Going back to the article. So it is understandable that people are suspicious and look to alternate sources for answers. The outlets which are warning them about the dangers of this virus and defending massive, unprecedented changes which have an immense impact on the lives of ordinary people have an extensive and well-documented history of lying about very important things. People are aware of this in their own ways and to varying degrees, and it doesn't help that all the usual suspects are behaving in a way that feels uncomfortably familiar. This pandemic will be more consequential than 9/11. It probably already is. People just don't realize any, but they still feel that once this is all over, we'll go back to the way things used to be. We won't, says the Bulwark, whose founder, Bill Kristol, was also the founder of the wildly influential think tank Project for a New American Century, the infamous PNAC. PNAC famously argued a year before the 9/11 attacks that the massive worldwide increase in U.S. military interventionism they were promoting at the time would not be possible without some catastrophic and catalyzing event, like a new Pearl Harbor, all of which, miraculously, came to pass. I personally believe there's enough evidence that this virus is sufficiently dangerous, this is her personal opinion, to justify many of the significant precautions nations have been taking, though, of course, we must oppose and be vigilant against government overstepping into authoritarianism. The statistics are still very blurry and unreliable, but the mountains of testimonies from rank-and-file medical staff pouring in from areas where the outbreak is bad constitute enough anecdotal evidence for me, for Caitlin, to believe that this virus can easily overwhelm our healthcare systems if we don't collectively take drastic measures to contain it. That said, she certainly can't cast blame on people who think the threat the virus poses is being greatly exaggerated. Not because I think they're right, but because you don't blame a population who's been constantly lied to for their disbelief in what they're being told by the very political/media class which has been lying to them. It's not the fault of the rank and file public that they're believing conspiratorial narratives, erroneous Facebook memes, right-wing pundits, and the US president over the mainstream press. It is the fault of the mainstream press themselves. Caitlin has taken a lot of flack in conspiracy theories lately for her relatively normie stance on COVID-19, but she also can't really take it personally because it isn't really their fault. Not everyone has the time and the resources to independently comb through many disparate bits of information about a single topic and synthesize a lucid understanding of what's going on. That's meant to be the job of the press. But since they've neglected to do their job time and time again, they lack the credibility to demand that people believe what they're reporting. So I never join in the loud figure wagging and aggressive demonization of those who express doubt in what's really going on with this thing. I'll leave that to those of a more mainstream bent, since they seem to enjoy it so much. As for myself, I will continue pointing out that the reason misinformation is so readily believed is the same as the reason Trump's criticisms of the mainstream press are so readily believed. The mainstream press has absolutely earned their garbage reputation. The whole reason the world is the way it is right now is because people have been manipulated by a media controlling class into an accepting an absolutely insane status quo as normal. That's the only reason anyone believes it makes sense for so few to have so much, while so many have so little. For trillions of dollars to be poured into military expansionism and wars which benefit no one but the rich and powerful. For the environment to be destroyed to make a few more millionaires into billionaires. For a demented right-wing racist warmonger to be running against another demented right-wing racist warmonger for the most powerful elected office on the planet. The big lies happen once in a while, but these little lies of normalizing our insane status quo happen every single day. On some level, everyone is aware, however dimly, that our society is crazy and needs to change drastically. And so they are also aware that this is the opposite of the message they receive every day from the authoritative narrative makers. The crazier things get, the more this awareness will necessarily grow, and the less people will trust the billionaire media whose only purpose is to maintain the status quo upon which its owners have built their respective kingdoms. You can't blame people for being distrustful when you make them that way. The people screaming the loudest about disinformation right now are the ones most responsible for it. The brilliant Caitlin Johnstone, check out her work, subscribe to notifications from her. AP, dismantling democracy. Virus used as excuse to quell dissent. This talks a lot about situations in other countries, Serbia, Hungary. I'll just read you a little excerpt from here, but this one's worth a read. In European Union member Hungary, Parliament on Monday passed a law giving Prime Minister Viktor Orban's government the right to rule by decree for as long as a state of emergency declared March 11th is in effect. The law also sets prison terms of up to 5 years for those convicted of spreading false information about the pandemic, and up to 8 years for those interfering with efforts to contain the spread of the coronavirus, like a curfew or quarantine. Rights groups and officials say the law creates the possibility of an indefinite state of emergency and gives Orban and his government carte blanche to restrict human rights and crack down on freedom of the press. Orban is dismantling democracy in front of our eyes, said Tanya Fajon, a member of the European Parliament. This is a shame for Europe, its fundamental values and democracy. He abused coronavirus as an excuse to kill democracy and media freedom. So no matter how bad it gets, it could always get worse. This goes on and on, talks about what they're doing in Russia, Israel, so on and so forth. Poland. So that one's worth a read if you feel like it. Most extreme in the Philippines, the leader says shoot them dead. The leader won't tolerate lockdown violators. There's actually a video of the president of the Philippines saying that people that violate the lockdown could be shot dead. Draconian lockdown powers, it's a slippery slope from hand washing to house arrest, published on April 2nd yesterday by John W. Whitehead over there by the heavily censored folks at Activist Post. This one's worth a read. Viktor Frankl, great book there on getting through trying times. If you haven't read Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, concentration camp survivor, strongly recommend it. Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in a given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. Great book there. Check this one out if you want a good read on the situation. One country that seems to be doing things right, Cuba. Medical students provide door-to-door virus care. Interesting, in Cuba, they got way more doctors per capita than we have in the U.S. In its fight against coronavirus, Cuba is relying on its world-renowned health services. According to the World Health Organization, the country has 82 physicians per 10,000 people, compared with 40 for Russia, 26 for the U.S., and 18 for China. We don't have the technology of rich countries, but we have a human personnel that is very qualified with great solidarity and selflessness, says Caballero Gonzalez. Door-to-door care is nothing new for Cubans, used to family doctors who have always done the rounds to look for any type of transmittable illness. Over the past 2 weeks, rounds have increased in order to reach 100% of the population in as little time as possible, she said. Medical students have joined the national effort because Cuba has an abundance of them, including thousands of foreigners attracted to the country's 25 medical faculties and the prestigious Latin American School of Medicine. So next time you see some propaganda bashing on Cuba, bear in mind the Cubans are doing some things right, keeping people at home, spreading awareness, taking the doctors to the people as opposed to taking all the sick people and putting them in a hospital where germs run rampant. File this one under things that make you say, we all know this coronavirus blamed on a bat. Now, I'm not making any conclusions off of this. Just strikes me as odd. This was published on January 9th, 2020. The first America the Beautiful quarters of 2020 feature a fruit bat mother and her pup, because nothing says American money supply like a couple bats on the back of the quarter. Just strikes me as a little bit odd. Another thing that makes you say, people have seen this, I'm sure. If you heard the, excuse me, don't worry, not the COVID, just a little tea going down the wrong pipe as I'm trying to talk here. This is published by the Sun Chronicle, which is a local paper in Massachusetts, Attleboro, Massachusetts, but you'll see all sorts of iterations on this story. Company formerly based in Mansfield played role in failed government ventilator program, updated 2 days ago. Mansfield, Massachusetts. COVID, Ian, keyword COVID. The medical products manufacturer formerly headquartered here played a major part in a nearly decade-old federal government program that it attempted to increase the nation's supply of ventilators, but was ultimately abandoned, a published report says. This article goes on and on. You can find out all sorts of stuff about it. Basically, there was a contract given to a company in California. Money was budgeted. A federal contract was signed. Work got underway, and then things suddenly veered off course. A multi-billion-dollar maker of medical devices, Covidian, I don't know how to pronounce it. Keyword, it's got COVID in the name, which strikes me as a little odd. They bought up the small California company that had been hired to design the new ventilator machines. The project ultimately produced 0 ventilators. Weird. Newport Medical in 2012, purchased by Covidian after they had agreed to a government contract to add thousands of ventilators to the national stockpile. Just more things that make you say, Another thing that really gets me saying, if you haven't looked into this yet, Event 201, October 2019, about 5-6 months ago, October 18th, 2019, November, December, January, February, March, 5.5 months ago, the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, in partnership with the World Economic Forum and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, hosted Event 201, a high-level pandemic exercise in New York, New York. The exercise illustrated areas where public-private partnerships will be necessary during the response to a severe pandemic in order to diminish large-scale economic and societal consequences. So that all sounds fine and dandy, but what do we have going on now? Well, we have public-private partnerships, which are not at all diminishing large-scale economic and societal consequences. We are seeing massive economic and societal consequences in the midst of all this. Interestingly, Event 201, what was the proposed, in their little think tank there 5.5 months ago, what was their, what was the pandemic they were talking about? It was a novel coronavirus. Interestingly, this is not the first time, that's just a thing that makes you say, especially when you look at Bill Gates's involvement in world events. Bill Gates, the man that wants to vaccinate the world. Bill Gates, who, according to the Telegraph, April 19th, 2018, is backing a $1 billion plan to cover the Earth with video surveillance satellites. Oh, Bill Gates. What to make of Billy Gates? But important to note, the foreign policy published on April 1st, America's pandemic war games don't end well. Event 201 was not the first time a pandemic was experimented with. In fact, by one count, there have been no less than 4 separate U.S. simulations that prefigure the events that unfolded in central China in January of this year. In 2005, Atlantic Storm, organized by the Center for Biosecurity at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, simulated an international outbreak of a smallpox pandemic, as opposed to the domestic smallpox terrorism attack stipulated by Dark Winter, another event. The SPARS pandemic 2025-28, conducted in 2017, tested medical responses to the outbreak of a novel coronavirus in St. Paul, Minnesota. CLADX, hosted by the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security in 2018, proposed a worldwide coronavirus outbreak with no vaccine. Another interesting event there, Johns Hopkins associated with, and which, according to Tom Inglesby, the center's director, was designed to provide experiential learning for Trump administration officials. And on October 2019, Event 201 presented an exercise that started with the outbreak of a novel coronavirus, a high-impact respiratory pathogen pandemic, as its designers premised, that spread globally and that presciently forecast COVID-19. Vaccine. The Independent, reporting 12 hours ago, the potential vaccine generates enough antibodies to fight off the virus. First peer-reviewed study suggests. The vaccine developed by U.S. researchers injected by 400 microneedles stuck onto the skin like a plaster. So apparently they're on their way to getting a vaccine together. White House advisor Fauci, who we cited earlier in that New England Journal of Medicine article, over there earlier in the show today, the White House advisor Fauci says coronavirus vaccine trial is on target and will be the ultimate game changer. In more ways than one, I would add. FDA approved the first antibody test in the U.S. to detect the coronavirus. Interestingly here, this is kind of important, I think, in the midst of all this. There are companies out there that are selling, without FDA approval, they're selling home tests, home antibody tests that seem, to my eye, to be very similar to this one that just got FDA approval. But the FDA-approved test must be conducted in a laboratory setting, aka at a doctor's office. The FDA approved this test produced by the biotech company Cellex under emergency use authorization, which allows for the test to be used prior to gaining full approval, provided there aren't any already approved alternatives, according to the FDA. Cellex's antibody test requires a blood sample that can be analyzed only in authorized labs. Okay, keywords there. Analyzed only in authorized labs. The test takes about 15 to 20 minutes to give results, according to the letter. The test looks for two types of antibodies, immunoglobulin M and immunoglobulin G. Okay. In contrast, this just talks about immunoglobulin N and immunoglobulin G. Here's a little more info on their test at fda.gov. You can see their little test strip here, right? Well, you can't see my finger on the screen there, but if you look, there's a good little diagram of what their test looks like. And again, only to be conducted in an approved laboratory setting. There's another company out there, Pinnacle Biolabs, that's also selling an immunoglobulin M and G test. You can see it right there on the box. IgM, that means immunoglobulin M, and IgG for home use. They're shipping out. So if you want a home test, you feel like getting tested, I have no connection to this company. You see, I'm not posting some affiliate link or anything, but these guys are making tests which can be conducted in the privacy of your own home. Very similar looking test kit to the one that got FDA approval for in a laboratory setting only. Interestingly, Big Brother on his way 8 hours ago, published by Business Insider. The UK plans to issue coronavirus immunity passports so people can leave the lockdown early. What's this all about? The UK plans to roll out immunity passports to allow people who have contracted COVID-19 to leave the lockdown early. UK Health Secretary Matt Hancock said the certificates would be issued to people who have built up immunity to the coronavirus so they can return to normal life. Citizens would need to test positive in an antibody test, which is what we were just talking about, before being issued with the certificates. However, the UK has yet to identify a reliable test for antibodies to the virus. Okay, and I got another article up here somewhere. I gotta pee. I get so excited. Important to note, folks like Pinnacle Biolabs are making those immunoglobulin G and immunoglobulin M tests. Say that 5 times fast. But the ones approved by the FDA must be conducted in a lab. I'll let you guys read a little personal anecdote about this guy, Andrew Sensini, computer science professor. I'm going to go pee. All right, thanks for your patience. So you probably got through all that by now, I would assume. Anyway, long story short, this guy, Andrew Sensini, went to the doctor because he had symptoms of COVID. They put him on an IV drip, did a chest x-ray. Now back at work remotely, he faces a mounting array of bills. His patient responsibility, according to his insurer, is close to $2,000, and he fears that more bills may come. The new $2 trillion coronavirus aid package allocates well over $100 billion to what Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer of New York called a Marshall Plan for hospitals and medical needs. That's right, $100 billion bailout to hospitals. But no one is doing much to similarly rescue patients from the related financial stress. And they desperately need protection from the kind of bills patients like Sensini are likely to incur in a system that freely charges for every bit of care it dispenses. On March 18th, President Donald Trump signed a law intended to ensure that Americans could be tested for the coronavirus for free, whether they have insurance or not. He had also announced that health insurers have agreed to waive patient co-payments for treatment of COVID-19, the disease caused by the virus. But their published policies vary widely, and leave countless ways for patients to get stuck. Although insurance have indeed agreed to cover the full cost of diagnostic coronavirus tests, that may well prove illusory. Sensini's test was free, but his visit to the ER to get it was not. Goes on and on. We all know the prices of things are very, very widely in this country. Let's see. And it goes on. The doctor who saw Sensini works with Emergency Care Services of New York, which provides physicians on contract to hospitals and works with some, but not all, insurers. It is affiliated with Team Health, a medical staffing business owned by the private equity firm Blackstone that has come under fire for generating surprise bills. Some senators have wanted to put a provision. Well, you get the gist of it. If you go to the doctor for your free COVID test, there's a lot of ways that you could still get stuck with a massive bill. Read this one if you're thinking about going to the doctor. Let's see. The coronavirus bills passed so far, and those on the table offer inadequate protection from assist and prime to bill patients for all kinds of costs. The Family's First Coronavirus Response Act, passed last month, says the test and its related charges will be covered with no patient charge, only to the extent that they are related to administering the test or evaluating whether a patient needs it. That leaves the hospital billers and coders wide berth. Sensini went to the ER to get a test, as he was instructed to do. When he called to protest his $1,622.52 bill for hospital charges, his insurer's discounted rate from over $2,500 in the hospital's bill charges, right? He has health insurance, which saved him $900. A patient representative confirmed that the ER visit and other services performed would be eligible for cost sharing. In his case, all of it, since he has not met his deductible for the year. This weekend, he was notified that the physician charge from Emergency Care Services of New York was $1,166. Though covered by his insurance, he owes another $321 for that, bringing his out-of-pocket costs to nearly $2,000. By the way, his test came back negative. When he got off the phone with his insurance, his blood was at the boiling point, he told us. My retirement account is tanking, and I'm expected to pay for this. The coronavirus aid package provides a stimulus payment of $1,200 per person for most adults, so they say. Thanks to the billing proclivities of the American healthcare system, that will not fully offset Sensini's medical bills. Obviously, this is at ABC News. Interestingly, this article is from Kaiser Health News. Okay, Kaiser Permanente, the Kaiser Family Foundation, which is not affiliated with Kaiser Permanente. I don't know why. The Kaiser Permanente is a large healthcare provider on the West Coast. But you can see right here, this is a Kaiser Health News story, which means it was paid content. I wonder why the Kaiser Family Foundation is putting up stories like this. The $1,200 checks, let's see, what do we got? I got something about that. Here we go. You're waiting on your stimulus check. You might be waiting a long time. Coming from the AP, published yesterday, some of the U.S. may not get stimulus checks until when? August. When you need money? Tough shit. The federal government expects to begin making payments to millions of Americans under the new stimulus law by mid-April. But some people without direct deposit information may not get checks until mid-August or later, according to a memo obtained by the Associated Press. So don't hold your breath for $1,200, my friends. You know as well as I do that $1,200 does not get you very far. Interestingly, these coronavirus immunity passports, here in the U.S., the FDA just approved a coronavirus antibody test, but it needs to be conducted in a lab, which means if you want one of these immunity passports, are you looking at a hospital bill like this guy Sensini in upstate New York that was saddled with almost $2,000 in hospital bills just for following the doctor's recommendations, getting his supposedly free coronavirus test. Shady business. This one I thought was kind of funny. We'll save that till the end. That's a little spoof on myself. What else do we got here? Nature, special report, the simulations driving the world's response to COVID-19, right? Simulations, just like climate simulations, just like climate models are being used to dictate policy for the next 100 years surrounding all sorts of aspects of human life. All these COVID policies are being implemented based on simulations as well. Okay. Wow. Doesn't look very fun eating in that cafeteria. Healthdata.org COVID-19 projections, assuming full social distancing through May 2020. I found this interesting here. They're saying we're going to hit our peak. This is modeling, take it with a grain of salt. Based on faulty figures, take those with a grain of salt. Based on profit-driven pseudoscience, which must also be taken with a grain of salt, conducted by the profit-driven private medical insurance pharmaceutical cartel and the corrupt, warmongering, power-hungry governments of the world. So take all that with a grain of salt. But what can we see here? They're saying 12 days until peak resource use on April 15th. Okay. One thing I thought was interesting here, though, you see this deaths per day statistic here. Here you can see there's their projection, the dotted line. Here's where we're actually at in the US. 900 deaths per day on April 1st. Projected to peak out around April 17th at 2,600 deaths per day. And then look at this sharp drop throughout May and June. And by July, we're basically down to a projection of, July 2nd, 15, July 3rd, 13, July 5th, 11, 10, 9, 7, 6, 5, 4. And by mid-July, projected 0 deaths per day due to coronavirus. Kind of sounds a lot like the flu, doesn't it? Same thing here. Projected total COVID deaths, you can see by mid-June, it's basically flattened out. And by July, these projections, these simulations are showing 0 new deaths. So take it with a grain of salt, but I just found that interesting. Again, these are assuming full social distancing through May. What does it all mean? I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. White House expected to recommend Americans wear cloth masks to prevent coronavirus spread, published on April 2nd over there at Stat News. New York City, let's look at some financial and economic news. I had to get into it eventually. If I'm going to keep y'all informed, we got to look at the ugly fallout of this stuff. New York's, we don't know exactly how deadly COVID is. As the situation progresses, we see that this whole situation might not be nearly as serious as we've been led to believe. We've seen that those statistics from Italy, and thus the overall death statistics of the entire world that are being broadcast by the Decepticon, profit-driven, corporate-owned mainstream media, cannot be trusted. But we do know what happens when millions of people lose their jobs, when millions of businesses are closed by government dictate. New York City current business condition plunges to lowest reading on record. No big surprise there, coming from our dear friend Tyler Durden over there at Zero Hedge. U.S. weekly job claims blow past 6 million. Put that into perspective, we got a handy little graphic here that was found in this Reuters article published on April Fool's Day, a couple of days ago. All-time record high jobless claims. Interestingly, last week they were saying somewhere around 3.5 million. Now 6.65 million. To put that into perspective, the previous peak took place at the height of the recession in the early 1980s. I think it was 1982. And if we look at the, you can see the recessions are the dark gray lines there. If we look at the, the Great Recession, as they called it, after the subprime mortgage crisis, all the bailouts and everything in 2008, 2009, The peak around then was similar. It was like 660,000 jobless claims per week. And now we have 10 times that many in 1 week. What's getting blamed for this? Coronavirus. If for any other reason this was taking place, do you think people would be out in the streets protesting? Do you think there would be a mass movement on par with the Occupy Wall Street protests we saw back in 2010, 2011? I would say so. Of course, how convenient that people are not allowed to leave their homes except for essential business and a little bit of exercise, walking the dog and such. But and what else? Joining up in groups, being within 6 feet of somebody has been made illegal in a lot of places. What a time to be alive, my friends. What a time to be alive. James Corbett, again, James Corbett, brilliant James Corbett. I love this guy. I've been following his work for a decade now, and I'm pasting that one into the comments there. Check this one out, published on March 28th, 2020, The Greatest Depression. Worth a little watch there. Thank you, James. Coming from the International Business Times, this is a global economic crisis, a global economic shutdown, arguably a reset of the entire global economic system that is being forced upon us. Coming from the International Business Times, published on April Fool's Day, 1/5 of the UK's small businesses, including 4 million jobs, may vanish in 1 month. And in the midst of all this, activist post, this is a repost from Tyler Durden over there at Zero Hedge. Millions of small businesses stunned to learn that they are not eligible for the bailout loans. Now, why is this? Well, let's read it. You don't have to take my word for it, but essentially, these businesses are not eligible for these Small Business Administration loans because they don't have outstanding debt. Odd. A recurring shock to millions of small business owners head to these bank websites to apply for the PPP loans is that, contrary to the SBA's guidance that any small business with 500 or less employees may apply, going to the lender portals, going to these banks' websites, show that only a very narrow subset of America's millions of small businesses will be eligible. In fact, only those companies that already have a lending relationship, i.e. an outstanding loan with a given bank, are, at least as of this moment, able to apply for the rescue funds. Bank of America's website confirms as much, stating on its eligibility page that only clients with a business lending and a business deposit relationship with Bank of America are eligible to apply for the Paycheck Protection Program through our bank. In other words, any business that only has a deposit account and no loan or business card is out of luck. If you look at this Small Business Administration Paycheck Protection Program under the Families First Act that was passed, in a nutshell, small businesses with less than 500 employees are said, let's go all the way back. These businesses are required, if they have to, whether they're allowed to operate or not, whether they've been shut down or not, these businesses are being told that they have to pay laid off employees 100% of their salary for 2 weeks, and then 67% of their salary for an additional 10 weeks. Okay? So these businesses are being required to keep paying their employees, whether or not they can work, which is good for employees in the short term, bad for small businesses. Why? Because these small businesses have been closed. A lot of these small businesses have been closed, and they're facing an extremely uncertain future. Now these businesses are eligible, quote unquote, for up to $2 million of loans through this Paycheck Protection Program, loans at 3.5% interest, bear in mind, after they've maxed out all other existing lines of credit. And now we're finding out that businesses that don't have an existing line of credit, businesses that operate in the black, that don't rely on lending, that don't have a previous lending relationship with one of these big banks, can't get the loan. And the kicker, literally, for those B of A clients who would like to become eligible and open a business loan account, well, it's too late. As the bank makes clear, this should have happened as of February 15th. Right from the BOA website, to apply for the Paycheck Protection Program through our bank, you must have a pre-existing business lending and business deposit relationship as of February 15th. Said otherwise, businesses who ran a clean balance sheet without debt are seen as riskier businesses than businesses that carry loans and are unduly penalized just because they never opened a loan with the Bank of America. JP Morgan is even more draconian in its selectivity of whom it will hand out Treasury guaranteed money to. As the bank notes in its ironically named CARES website, you must have a Chase business checking account as of February 15th, 2020. Anyone who does not is straight out of luck. And as countless other banks follow suit, the question becomes, is this how the banks that were bailed out by ordinary Americans in 2008 will treat those same Americans when they need a rescue too? Alternatively, what happens to these banks when millions of small businesses fail and America's economy plunges into an even deeper depression? One final question. How is it logical for banks to only bail out those companies which already have debt and are by extension riskier than to provide funds to their ordinary clients who only now, for the first time, need a helping hand? We eagerly await Steve Mnuchin's answers to these questions. This is a really good article or a good video. I covered this briefly. This is old. It's a month old almost. Derek Bros fast checks the 5G coronavirus hypothesis. Derek Bros, guy I met out of Standing Rock, put out a great documentary film with the full transcript and sources over there at theconsciousresistance.com, the 5G Trojan horse. I recommend people check that out. A lot of folks think anybody who's opposed to the rollout of these untested, or if they have been tested, proven health hazardous technologies, potential crowd control, population control technologies, potential health, mental, physical, spiritual health altering, and even behavior and mood altering technologies. We've been labeled conspiracy theorists, and it's an important concern. I would say there's even an organization right here in Wyoming, based in Teton Village, Wyoming, at the base of the closed Jackson Hole Mountain Resort, called the Environmental Health Trust, ringing the alarm about the dangers of 5G. I encourage anybody that wants more info on this topic to check out Derek Bros' excellent documentary, The 5G Trojan Horse, or head on over to the Environmental Health Trust. Two great sources for information on that. And we're going to end it on a lighthearted note here. Published on February 20th, 2019 at nature.com, scientific reports, aerosol emission and super emission during human speech increase with voice loudness, right? Maybe someday it will be illegal to raise your voice because you could be spreading germs. Mechanistic hypotheses about airborne infectious disease transmission have traditionally emphasized the role of coughing and sneezing, which are dramatic expiratory events that yield both easily visible droplets and large quantities of particles too small to see by eye. Nonetheless, it has long been known that normal speech also yields large quantities of particles that are too small to be seen by eye, but are large enough to carry a variety of communicable respiratory pathogens. Here we show that the particle emission during normal human speech is positively correlated with the loudness amplitude of vocalization, ranging from approximately 1 to 50 particles per second for high to low amplitudes, regardless of the language spoken. Furthermore, a small fraction of individuals behaves as speech super emitters, consistently releasing an order of magnitude more particles than their peers. So, my friends, if you're out there talking, don't pronunciate, don't pop your P's, because you could be making people sick. I just thought that was kind of fun note to end it on. And on that note, I'm signing off for now. Thank you all for tuning in. We got 34 viewers still. Thank you all. Let's check the comments. Anybody got a question for me? Lay it on me right now. We got Daniel, Kate. Thanks for being here. A lot of good comments. Mitch Gluck said he's being sick for 8 days. It's not garbage. Mitch, hang in there, man. I hope you heal up. Again, when I'm making these broadcasts, I'm not trying to say that the coronavirus is not real. I'm not trying to say that it's a hoax. It's a serious disease, right? There are a lot of serious diseases out there. People are getting sick with this. People are dying from this. It's no laughing matter. And I hope people realize that I'm not trying to diminish the severity of the situation, right? Some people, especially the elderly, folks that are immunocompromised, have a very serious risk of dying from this disease and many other diseases. But we got to take a look at the big picture, and we got to take a look at what is going on, what's being done with the coronavirus as its justification. Kate Catanella, thank you too. You're real sweet. I really appreciate that. Everybody out there, Daniel Reichert, stay safe and healthy. Everyone, peace out. On that note, I'm signing off. Remember, folks, the mainstream media is specifically designed to distract us, divide us, deceive us, depress the living shiznit out of us, and deter us from taking positive action. What can we do? We can take care of ourselves and the ones we love. We can focus on the things that we can do in our own lives, within our own circles of influence, to make the world a better place. We have a choice. Just like Viktor Frankl said in Man's Search for Meaning, we have a choice as to our attitude in these situations. We have a choice as to how we react. There's that, no matter how much freedom is taken away, we still have a choice. And I choose to share all this information with you. I hope you choose to share it with other folks as well. As always, take it with a grain of salt. I'm just one guy trying to spread a little awareness, spread a little love. Remember, stay active, stay aware, take care of yourselves and the ones you love. I'm out. Have a great day. Beautiful out there. I'm going to go enjoy it. One love. Peace.